Okay, Julie, I have a question here, and I know you talk about this a little bit in your book as well, but can you tell me more about this idea of design for social and informal learning? How does that work, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So there are people who are absolutely more expert in this area than I am, but that was one of the big additions between the first edition and the second edition of the book because there was so much happening in that space. And that goes to this question of complexity, right? We talked about the complex domain where things are always changing. One of the problems you're always going to have whenever you're creating learning materials, any kind of learning and development materials, is you have this issue of stuff being out of date pretty much as soon as you get it documented. And so, one of the ways to kind of think about that is to think about, can I have more flexible learning environments or learning tools that can be more adaptive to changing circumstances? So there's some stuff, again, about like an ERP implementation or something that's pretty nailed down. Like we know that it's the same. And so then putting that into a more formal form of learning and development can be solid. So like I worked for a finance company years ago, and stuff like the formulas and the methods around calculating loan payments, or how did you explain to somebody how a loan payment was calculated, that's accounting that's existed for decades, or
Right,
more than decades. It's
right.
not changing. And so we could invest in that and feel very confident that that material, if we made an e-learning out of it, formally built that out somewhere, that that's going to be solid a year from now and 5 years from now. This stuff isn't going to change. But then you have stuff where the answer of what do we need to do, or how do we need to handle this, or what is a particular person going to need. So you get these environments that are much more variable. So it might be that the content's changing all the time as we move through the process, or it could be that what a particular person needs is changing all the time as we move through the process or whatever. And so we look for more flexible ways of managing that. And one of the tools or strategies that you can use is kind of social or informal learning. So somebody needs to know how to do a particular thing in Articulate, which is an e-learning authoring tool. Well, the best and easiest way that they can do that is to go out to the big community around that, which is a community called eLearning Heroes, and you just ask the question and somebody is going to show up and help you with it. Or you do a quick search on the archives, because the chances are actually that like 13 other people have already asked this question and that
Hmm.
there's
Yep.
good answers out there. And it doesn't have to be the official answer quite so much. So obviously social and informal makes people in high compliance or regulatory environments nervous, because you can have quote unquote wrong answers floating out there. And I have mixed feelings about that. In one hand, I get it. And on the other hand, it's like, well, they're still having these conversations. You just can't see them doing it
Yeah.
if you don't create spaces for them to have the conversations.
Yeah.
So creating opportunities for people who are dealing with the same problems to talk to each other and to share their experience and to share their insight, and for people who are, at an earlier stage in the process to be able to ask questions from people who are later stage in the process. Like these are a lot of the goals that we have around social or informal learning. And then it just becomes a question of how do I support that, or how do I create some space for it, or how do I make sure that they have methods of communicating with each other. I did a project years ago for a pharmaceutical company, and it was this whole scenario based thing around managing pharmaceutical reps and things like that. And I think the scenarios we created were good, and I think we got some value from it. But honestly, the best thing that came out of that is these sales managers who were distributed geographically and only got to talk to each other like 3 times a year at district meetings or something, could actually like communicate back and forth in this virtual environment every day. And just the fact that they were able to like talk to each other and go, oh man, that happens to you? Oh, I totally had that last week. Here's what I did.
Yeah.
That facilitating those conversations so people can kind of support each other again in that moment of need. Like, I need this information right now, and I don't want to go to the training course to find it. And I don't, like I can't go to the training course to find it. It's not available. And I don't want to find the one page in the e-learning on slide 76 that told me the thing. I just need help with this problem right now. That's the really great things that we get out of social and informal learning environments, is much more management of complexity, much more management of like the answers changing. So who's got the latest answer? Much more of that, like, how do I get the specific thing that I need right now? So having some strategy around that can help encourage it and can help create spaces for it. And then that becomes a really nice feedback mechanism for the
Yeah.
people who are creating the training, because they can go in and see, in the social forum or in the group chat, what things people are concerned about or what places they're having issues or any of those kinds of things. It becomes a nice iterative mechanism, and maybe some of that can be formalized out because, it is stable, but we didn't know that they needed to know that until we saw them asking those questions.
So, Julie, as a L&D expert, how tactically then do you facilitate that? Is it really a matter of maybe setting up, you said the space, so maybe it's, setting up an hour or two workshops and getting people together and just having open dialogue, or is it creating an online forum, or what does that look like, a little more tactically? How do you actually facilitate that process?
Yeah, this may be a whole separate conversation. There's some good stuff out there around the community development. My favorite resource for that is Amy Jo Kim's book, Community Building for the Web, which talks about how a community, there's a bunch of roles that exist. If you're trying to create a big learning community around the thing, there's different people who are, fulfilling different roles. There's somebody who's kind of greeting newbies and sort of ushering them in. There's some safe places where they can kind of go check stuff out before they have to jump right into the conversation. There's people who are your gold-plated go-to people who are going to be able to answer lots of questions and who like answering questions, and how do you support them and make sure that they've got good access to be that helpful resource. There's a lot of answers to it. The shortest version of the tactical answer is to ask yourself the question are any of these conversations happening right now? Can we just go to where they are and support it better? And make sure more people know about it. So if those conversations are happening in the lunchroom, the answer is that one's kind of hard to scale. But I'm doing a lot of stuff in global healthcare right now, and WhatsApp is very much the method that people use. So if we want people to communicate with their sort of equivalent practitioners in other countries, they're all on WhatsApp anyway. So if we create a WhatsApp group for this particular topic, they're going to be in the app. They're much more likely to participate in it than if we create a Facebook group where, most people in the target audience are already on Facebook or aren't always already using Facebook for things. So, asking the question of how are they communicating now? How are they interacting now? Can we leverage that, but for this topic? If everybody uses some kind of internal message board, then let's create an internal message board. So the best answer is meet them where they are and then just create some space or facilitate it. If you're starting from scratch, both in the idea of like people talking to each other and also the technology platform they're using to talk to each other, then that's probably a whole podcast conversation all on its own.
Exactly.